Hi, I'm Mindy Burgoyne, and I'm here in Marion Station at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, walking in their beautiful graveyard. Now, some people find graveyards creepy, or some people think they're haunted. I don't think either. I think graveyards are incredibly moving. They're beautiful, almost garden-like, but they do have a certain feel about them that sometimes creeps people out. And when I think about why that might be, I think that, human emotion can impact an energy field. And the only thing we do in graveyards or cemeteries is be emotional. We come here to bury the dead. We're sad. We come to remember our lost loved ones, and we're sad. We come to read the headstones and see some of the tragedies of people that died too soon, or children that died, and we feel that emotion. Or we just come to remember people. So if you have years and years, layer upon layer, of people coming here feeling a sense of mourning, that's going to hang in the air, and that's going to certainly charge the energy around this. So that's one little thing about graveyards. I do not believe that spirits haunt graveyards, but I do think that the portal between the two worlds is very thin in a graveyard. And if you were to call on a spirit, if you were to reach out to the spirit of a loved one, it'd be very easy to connect in a graveyard, because that barrier between the two worlds is very thin here. A little bit of graveyard trivia. The difference between a graveyard and a cemetery is that a graveyard is in the yard of a church, and you can see the church behind me here. This is in their attached property, so this would be a graveyard. Another thing, if you've ever heard people say, don't step on a grave. It's so disrespectful to walk on somebody's grave. That was really something that people came up with because it was dangerous, to walk on graves. When people were buried in years past, they were buried in wooden boxes, and when the body decays and the box decays, there's an air pocket. Now, after a while, they sort of bricked them over so that once that casket decayed, there would be a little protection. But if you walk on these graves, these old graves, they're liable to cave in. And in fact, we have right here behind me a grave of a child. Actually, two children were buried here. The tombstones say that they were buried in 1881. So one was in 1876, named Bessie. The other was Willa in 1881. And if you look down here, you can see that the grave has sunken in. Now, there are no bones or anything exposed here, and it's not that deep, but it is what happens after a long while. Now we put caskets in vaults, and you're protected, but that's really why you were told not to walk on graves, and that's a good idea in an older cemetery like this. The reason I love cemeteries so much is because they're full of stories. And one of the saddest stories in all of this area is really marked in the grave over here. If you saw the previous video that I did on Crybaby Bridge, you'll know the story of Annie Connor. Annie was 4 years old, and in May, or actually July of 1875, she was with her mother, Eliza Connor, on a carriage. They were coming back from town, returning home. It started to storm, and as they were crossing Mill Dam Bridge, which goes over East Creek, the horse was spooked, and the horse went over the bridge along with Eliza and Annie. And of course, Eliza looked frantically for her daughter but couldn't get her. And Annie was washed away and was found days later down East Creek. This is the marker behind me of Eliza and Nathan Connor, Annie's parents. Another tragedy in this family happened 12 years later. They had a son named Charles who was 7. And Charles was standing in a store in Tull's Corner underneath of a wagon that was sort of was attached to the ceiling to be able to work on the underside of it, a carriage. And for some unknown reason, or maybe for no reason, what was holding the cart broke, and it fell right on little Charles, crushing his head, and he died. And that was the second child that Eliza and Nathan lost. If you look at Eliza and Nathan, they raised a very large family here in Marion. They were a big farming family. Many of the Connors are still here, and they died just a couple days apart. You can see that Nathan died February 7th, 1912, and Eliza died February 10th, 1912, and they were well up in years. And they're buried under this obelisk next to Nathan's parents, and then on the back is the memorial to Annie F., who died in 1875, and Charles W., who died in 1883, children of Nathan T. and Eliza Connor. So there are many, many stories in cemeteries, and it's kind of nice to remember people, the contribution that they made and the sadness that they suffered as you walk through. So this particular graveyard is on our Somerset bus tour. And there are many other stories that we pointed out, including the grave of Ann Smiles, who was the person that lived in my house many years ago. We talk a lot about him. So if you're interested, then hop on the Somerset bus tour. And this is, again, I'm Mindy Burgoyne, and this is a haunted minute or two or three.